The CIA has confirmed it is looking into allegations made to Congress that several CIA analysts were paid off to change their position on the origins of COVID-19. Mary Kissel was the senior advisor to former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. She currently works as a senior policy advisor at investment banking firm Stevens. I caught up with her earlier and I started by asking her about the whistleblower's claims about the CIA and whether this interference in the intelligence community came as a surprise.
Well, I can't speak to the veracity of the whistleblower's claim, Sharri, but I do think that this is the American democratic process at work, and this is exactly what the House Oversight Committee should be doing. It's a bipartisan committee. There are, I think, medical doctors on the Republican and the Democrat side, serious people, and it's not the only committee that is examining the actions of Communist China. In fact, it is a bipartisan concern on Capitol Hill. That's a big shift from where we were only a few years ago. And I believe that we'll get to the truth of what actually happened, not just inside the intelligence agencies, but also at agencies like Health and Human Services and NIH. And these are important questions to ask and be answered because, of course, there's been no accountability for what the Communist Party did, killing millions of people and sending the global economy into a tailspin. And because we don't know the full story, and because we haven't had any accountability, I think it's safe to say that their practices have likely not changed, and that should frighten everyone, because that means that the likelihood of this happening again is, unfortunately, I would judge, high.
Absolutely, and it follows an investigation I did where Defense Intelligence Agency scientists were censored from Joe Biden's 90-day probe. Are you concerned that there are people inside the intelligence community who prefer to side with the natural origins theory and the Chinese Communist Party rather than upset the globalist world order?
Well, I worked in the Trump administration and I saw that resistance inside the State Department. So there was resistance across many parts of government. And I think it's important to say that, while we think of scientists as unassailable experts, they too not just have political motivations, but they also have monetary concerns and incentives. So we know that the U.S. government was funding research at the Wuhan lab. We know that there were domestic political reasons why the administration may not want to have confronted Beijing on what it was learning. We don't know the full truth yet. But again, I think that's why it's important that House Oversight and others are doing this work in a bipartisan way, and hopefully we will learn the truth. I mean, I'll tell you, Sharri, I talk to all kinds of clients, private equity funds and boards and CEOs, and they're getting out of China because they don't want to take the risk. They understand now the nature of the regime that they're dealing with. And so whether it was COVID or the Russia's war on Ukraine, they're getting out while parts of our government are trying to push them back in. I think it's a very interesting and telling divergence.
Mary, you were the former senior advisor to the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. What's your view of Joe Biden at the G20 recently when he said that we want to see China succeed economically?
Well, I think the United States and other democracies, prominent democracies like yours around the world, suffer from what I would call strategic confusion in a couple of senses, as that quote illustrates. First of all, we don't really know what our role should be in the world anymore. There's a great debate that's erupted in the United States over that very question, and you've even seen it raised in the presidential debates more than a year before the election. That's remarkable. Usually our elections are about domestic economic issues. But secondly, there's confusion about just how threatening is this regime. We don't call Communist China an enemy yet. And so, again, I'll just go back to some of the conversations that I've been having with our clients in the private sector. They don't have clear lines here. It's still legal to do business over there. Of course, it's not legal to sell them missile parts, but it's legal to sell them Mars bars. And so you have boards and CEOs confronting essentially a transitional era where we know it's bad, but we're not quite willing to say it yet. And that leads our political leaders to very odd comments like, we want China's economy to succeed. Well, we want the Chinese people to succeed, but if that economy is being ruled and overseen by a totalitarian regime that wants to dominate us, which is what they say, then do we really think that a growing economy is a good thing for us and our safety and the security, not just of democracies, but of the world? Clearly not. But we're not there yet. And unfortunately, history teaches us that these transitional periods can be very dangerous.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is planning a trip to China this year to meet with Xi Jinping. What would be your message to him ahead of his trip?
Well, China has one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world. And unlike other nuclear powers, we don't have any visibility into where those weapons are, the state of them, the speed at which they're building up their arsenals. We already know that they have the largest Navy in the world, the third largest Air Force, 1 million-man army, biological, chemical weapons programs. They're attacking our satellites every day. That's public information. They're attacking us in the cyber realm. They're cutting cables in the Pacific. We should always want to have the possibility of dialogue with a regime like that. The door should always be open. So I don't have any problem with leaders of the democracies of the world being open to talking to Xi Jinping. But they should also speak over the regime to the Chinese people, because the party and the people are two different things. And secondly, as I've just said, it really doesn't accrue to the benefit of anyone if we go to Beijing and simply ask them for things and pretend that they're behaving in a different way. They're not. You have to look at what they do. And we also should really extract consequences for what they say, too, because if you look at the military that they're building it for global domination. Head of our Air Force just said that in the last 2 days. When you look at how they've used it, they've become only more aggressive as they've built it over time. And then when you look at their rhetoric, to circle back to where I started, Xi Jinping is very clear that he sees the West as an enemy. So I think we should believe him. Let's be clear about the nature of this regime, about its intentions. Let's take the lessons of what happened with Russia and Ukraine and think to yourself, what would happen if everybody had to pull out tomorrow because China attacked Taiwan or, God forbid, did something even bigger? I think Xi Jinping's ambitions are much bigger than Taiwan. I think it's very clear from the military that he's building. And to me, that's a much more important thing to focus on than a one-off visit or TikTok or other things. We need to focus on the real threat that this country is posing, not just to your region, but to our way of life and to the world.
Mary Kissel, so wonderful to speak with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Great to be with you, Sharri. Thanks for having me.